Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for more stories like this one. Today's story is about Dr. Eleanor Vance and how a single whispered sentence can detonate a decade of carefully constructed life. Dr. Eleanor Vance had always believed in the structural integrity of her life. At 42, a cardiothoracic surgeon in Seattle, she thought she had built something permanent, something that could withstand the seismic shocks of the outside world. Her career was a fortress of competence, her friendships were reinforced steel, and her 10-year marriage to Chloe was the deep, unshakable foundation upon which everything else rested. They had a meticulously restored Craftsman in Queen, and with a view of the Sound, a shared love for kayaking on summer evenings, and a rhythm of domesticity that felt as steady and vital as a healthy heartbeat. She had believed their love was an architectural marvel, designed to last. Until a Tuesday night in October, when a single whisper revealed that the foundation was nothing but sand, and a tsunami was already on its way. Eleanor spent her days holding human hearts in her hands, bypassing blockages and repairing delicate valves with a steadiness that bordered on supernatural. She understood systems, the elegant logic of the body, and the precise interventions required to restore function. She applied a similar, if less clinical, logic to her marriage. When Chloe had grown distant over the past 6 months, Eleanor had diagnosed the symptoms: stress. Chloe, an architectural designer of considerable talent, was supposedly consumed by a massive new project in Portland, a boutique hotel that promised to be her masterpiece. The late nights at her studio, the hushed phone calls, the weekends spent poring over blueprints, Eleanor categorized them all under professional dedication. The new vocabulary Chloe had adopted, gleaned from the therapist she'd started seeing, felt like a positive development. Words like authenticity, self-actualization, and the need to hold space for her own narrative seemed like healthy tools for managing the pressure. Eleanor, accustomed to dealing with life-or-death realities, had little patience for the nebulous language of therapy, but if it helped Chloe, she supported it. She had held space, an entire stadium of it, believing she was supporting her wife's ambition, not facilitating her exit. The signs had been there, of course, tiny hairline fractures in the facade. Chloe now guarded her phone with the ferocity of a dragon protecting its hoard. She, who had once shared every silly meme and client email, now angled the screen away, the device perpetually face down on the granite countertop. There were credit card statements with charges from Portland restaurants Eleanor had never heard of. On weekends, Chloe was supposed to be at a design conference in the city. When asked, Chloe had been breezy, dismissive. "Oh, that was a team dinner, hon. You know how it is." Eleanor, who routinely worked 36-hour shifts and sutured aortas by lamplight, knew how it was. She chose to believe. Trust was a choice, an active verb, and she was a devoted practitioner. It was easier to believe in overwork than in betrayal, easier to accept the story of an ambitious wife than the reality of a duplicitous one. The bitter irony, she would later reflect, was that for a woman who could diagnose a murmur from across a room, she had been deaf to the arrhythmia in her own home. The discovery, when it came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation over a damning text message or a lipstick-stained color. It was quiet, insidious, and delivered in the sanctum of their shared bed. It was late. A soft rain whispered against the window panes, a familiar Seattle lullaby. Eleanor had just finished a grueling surgery and was drifting in that blissful state between exhaustion and sleep, her arm draped over Chloe's waist. The warmth of her wife's body was a comfort she had taken for granted for 3,652 nights. Chloe had been restless, shifting beside her, her breathing shallow. Eleanor, half asleep, murmured, "Everything okay?" For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain. Then, Chloe's voice, so soft it was almost part of the storm, slid into the darkness. "I think I still love her." The words didn't register at first. They were an anomaly, a data point that didn't fit any known diagnosis. Her? Eleanor's mind, trained to find the source of a problem, cycled through possibilities. An old college friend? A character in the book Chloe was reading? Then, like a dye spreading through a coronary artery and revealing a catastrophic blockage, The name surfaced with sickening clarity: Isabella, Chloe's former business partner. The brilliant, mercurial Isabella, who had moved to Portland 2 years ago after their partnership dissolved with a polite, professional chilliness Eleanor had never fully understood. The Portland Project. The late nights. The secret dinners. The puzzle pieces didn't just fall into place, they slammed together with the force of a car crash. The air left Eleanor's lungs. A cold dread, colder than any operating room, flooded her veins, starting in her chest and spreading to the tips of her fingers and toes. Her body, the reliable machine she commanded with such precision, felt alien. Nausea clawed at her throat. She had held dying hearts that felt warmer than her own at that moment. She withdrew her arm from Chloe's waist as if she'd been burned. The space between them, once a few inches of cotton sheet, was now a chasm. She lay perfectly still, her surgeon's mind taking over, assessing the wound. It was not a laceration to be sutured. It was a full cardiac rupture. Non-survivable. In the deafening silence that followed, she heard the frantic, useless beat of her own betrayed heart. She turned her head on the pillow. In the faint glow of the street lamp outside, she could just make out Chloe's profile, her eyes squeezed shut as if bracing for a blow. She had finally said it. The truth. A truth that had been living in their house for months, a ghost at their dinner table, a third person in their bed. And in that moment of absolute, crystalline certainty, Eleanor Vance made a decision. She would not beg. She would not cry, not in front of her. She would not ask for details that would only serve to twist the knife. She would perform the only procedure left: an amputation. Her voice, when she spoke, was devoid of all warmth, a flat line on a monitor. It was the voice she used to pronounce a time of death. Then don't come home. Chloe's eyes snapped open, wide with a shock that was almost comical in its naivete. She clearly had not anticipated this response. She had likely rehearsed a scene in her head, a tearful drama filled with Eleanor's pain and her own soul-searching justifications. A scene where she would be the conflicted protagonist of a tragic romance, and Eleanor would be the collateral damage, expected to absorb the blow with grief and, eventually, some form of pained understanding. She had not planned for the surgeon. She had not planned for the calm, quiet finality of a door being closed, locked, and bolted from the inside. "What?" Chloe whispered, sitting up, the sheet pooling around her waist. No, it's not. It's not what you think. I can explain." Eleanor remained preternaturally still, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "There is nothing to explain, Chloe," she said, her tone level, each word a carefully placed instrument. "You said you love her. The verb is present tense. The noun is specific. The thought is complete." Chloe began to stammer, the carefully curated language of her therapist failing her in the face of this cold reality. It's complicated. My feelings are. I've been exploring this. My therapist says it's important to honor your authentic feelings, even the difficult ones. Isabella and we've just been talking. Reconnecting. Working on the hotel design. It's been so intense, so creative. It stirred up old feelings. It was a masterful performance of self-deception, a desperate attempt to reframe an affair as a wellness journey. Eleanor could almost admire the audacity. Honoring her authentic feelings. The phrase was so grotesquely selfish, so profoundly dismissive of the vows they had taken, of the life they had built. Her authentic feeling, right now, was a homicidal rage, but she was honoring her commitment to self-preservation instead. "So you honored your feelings by lying to me for 6 months," Eleanor stated, not a question but a diagnosis. "You honored them on your business trips to Portland. You honored them with every secret phone call and every deleted message. You have been conducting a secret life while I was here, holding this one together. While I was pulling 24-hour shifts, you were exploring your narrative. It's a very compelling story. It's just not one I'm interested in being a part of anymore." Chloe's defensiveness began to crumble, replaced by the first tremor of panic. It wasn't a secret life. It was just confusing. "I didn't want to hurt you until I knew what was real." The sheer, insulting stupidity of that sentence nearly made Eleanor laugh. A dark, bitter sound. You didn't want to hurt me? Chloe, you have hollowed out the last year of our marriage and filled it with lies. You sat across from me at dinner, you kissed me goodnight, you let me comfort you about the stress of a project that was a cover for your affair. The hurting part is already done. It's a pre-existing condition. This is just the autopsy. The finality in Eleanor's voice finally registered. Chloe's face crumpled. The sophisticated, self-actualized artist vanished, replaced by a frightened child who had just shattered her favorite toy and realized it couldn't be glued back together. Please, Elle, don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I love you. Of course I love you, but the words were weightless, counterfeit currency. The real treasure had already been given away. Eleanor finally sat up, swinging her legs over the side of the bed, her back to Chloe. She felt a strange detachment, as if she were observing a clinical case from a distance. The patient, this marriage, was terminal. There were no heroic measures to be taken. No, we can't, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. You made a choice. You chose to reconnect with her. You chose to lie. You chose to build a fantasy while I was living in our reality. And just now, you chose to tell me you love her. Choices have consequences. She stood up and walked to the closet, pulling out an empty suitcase from the top shelf and setting it on the bed. The sound it made on the duvet was a dull, final thud. Pack a bag, she said, not looking at her. I want you to leave. Tonight, the panic escalated into raw desperation. Tonight? Eleanor, be reasonable. It's 2 a.m. Where am I supposed to go? The question hung in the air, pathetic and self-serving. Eleanor turned, her eyes cold and clear. I imagine you'll go to Portland. To her. Isn't that the authentic choice? The next morning, after a sleepless night spent on the living room sofa listening to Chloe's muffled sobs and the sounds of her packing, Eleanor watched from the window as her wife's car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the gray Seattle dawn. The house was silent. Alone. Completely alone. The grief she had been holding at bay threatened to overwhelm her, a massive hemorrhage. But she compartmentalized it, the way she did in the OR. There would be time for that later. Now was the time for action. At 8:01 a.m., she called Dr. Anya Sharma, the most feared and respected divorce attorney in the city. Anya was known as the Shark not just for her tenacity, but for her bloodless, surgical precision. Eleanor explained the situation in calm, concise terms. Anya listened without interruption. Good, Anya said when she was done. No hysterics. This is a logistical problem with a financial solution. First, go to your bank. Open a new account in your name only and transfer exactly 50% of your joint liquid assets into it. Not a penny more. Document it. Second, change the locks. Third, do not, under any circumstances, speak to her. All communication goes through me. Understood. Eleanor understood. It was a clear, actionable protocol. It was a language she knew. The consequences for Chloe cascaded with a speed and ferocity that was almost biblical. She did, as Eleanor predicted, flee to Portland, to the open arms of Isabella and the romantic fantasy she had nurtured for months. But reality, as it so often does, had sharp edges. The boutique hotel project, their shared creative passion, was leveraged on a single, high-stakes investor, a tech mogul who happened to be one of Eleanor's former patients and a regular at the hospital's fundraising galas. When Anya Sharma's office sent the initial divorce filing, which, with elegant precision, mentioned Chloe's breach of fiduciary duty to her marriage, word traveled fast. The investor, a man who abhorred messy personal entanglements and valued his relationship with the city's top heart surgeon, got cold feet. He initiated a review of the project's finances and structure. That's when Anya's team discovered the second bombshell. In the dissolution of their previous design firm, Chloe and Isabella had signed a stringent non-compete and non-collaboration clause, valid for 5 years. Their new hotel project was a flagrant violation of that agreement. Faced with a partner embroiled in an acrimonious divorce and the clear legal threat of a contract breach, the investor pulled his funding completely. The project didn't just stall, it imploded, leaving a crater of debt and shattered dreams. Chloe's professional masterpiece had become her professional tombstone. The romance, built on the unstable ground of clandestine meetings and the thrill of the forbidden, could not survive the harsh light of unemployment and impending litigation. Isabella, who had been drawn to Chloe's renewed ambition and success, had little appetite for failure. The creative, passionate woman she had reconnected with was now just a desperate, soon-to-be divorced woman sleeping on her couch. Within 2 months, Isabella, citing a need for space and less drama, asked Chloe to leave. The great love story was over. Eleanor, meanwhile, moved through the wreckage of her own life with a methodical grace. She grieved. There were nights when the silence of the big house was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She missed the woman she had married, not the stranger Chloe had become. She mourned the future they were supposed to have, the easy companionship, the shared history. She let herself feel the pain, but she did not let it consume her. She worked. In the operating room, her focus was absolute. The intricate dance of her hands, the rhythmic beep of the monitors, the singular goal of mending what was broken, it was her sanctuary. She took on the most complex cases, the ones others deemed hopeless, and she fought for every single life. Her friends, her true chosen family, formed a protective circle around her. They brought her food, dragged her out for hikes in the Cascades, and sat with her in silence when that was what she needed. They never once said, "I told you so," even though some of them had harbored private doubts about Chloe for years. They simply showed up. Chloe's attempts to breach the wall of silence were relentless at first. A barrage of texts, voicemails, and emails, each one a different stage of manipulative grief. There was the blame-shifting Chloe. "You were so busy with your career, I felt invisible." There was the minimizing Chloe. "It was a mistake, a stupid flirtation that meant nothing." And finally, the desperate, bargaining Chloe. "I'll do anything. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I love you, only you. Please, just talk to me." Eleanor read none of it. She forwarded every message to Anya, who archived them as evidence of harassment. The divorce was finalized in just under a year. Thanks to Chloe's clear infidelity and the professional misconduct that had torpedoed her own earning potential, the settlement was heavily in Eleanor's favor. She got the house and the majority of their assets. Chloe was left with her half of the initial savings and a mountain of debt from the failed project. Justice wasn't a lightning bolt from the heavens. It was the quiet, methodical work of a good lawyer and the natural, unavoidable consequences of one's own actions. 2 years passed. 2 years of healing, of rebuilding, of rediscovering the woman she was outside of her marriage. Eleanor found she was still whole. She sold the big Craftsman in Queen Anne, a beautiful house haunted by a ghost, and bought a minimalist condo in Belltown with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the endless, churning gray of Puget Sound. The view reminded her that everything was in motion, that nothing was permanent, and there was a certain peace in that. She was promoted to chief of cardiothoracic surgery at the hospital. She started dating again, cautiously at first. She met a woman named Sarah, a landscape architect with kind eyes and dirt under her fingernails, whose love was not a dramatic performance, but a quiet, steady presence, like a deep-rooted tree. One Saturday afternoon, Eleanor was in a small independent coffee shop in Fremont, waiting for Sarah, when the past walked in. It was Chloe. The change was startling. The expensive, architectural clothing was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded hoodie. Her once flawless haircut was overgrown, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of long, sleepless nights. She looked diminished, faded, a pale copy of the vibrant woman Eleanor had once loved. Chloe saw her and froze, a deer in the headlights. For a moment, Eleanor felt a flicker of something, not pity, exactly, but a sad acknowledgement of the waste. The sheer, pointless waste of it all. Chloe gathered her courage and walked over to Eleanor's table, her hands clutching her purse strap. "Elle," she said, her voice raspy. "Hi." Eleanor looked up from her book, her expression calm and neutral. "Chloe, you look amazing," Chloe stammered, a painful, genuine admiration in her eyes. "Happy I am," Eleanor replied simply. It was the truth. Listen, I know I have no right, but I just have to say it. I am so sorry. For everything. I was a fool. I destroyed the most important thing in my life for a fantasy, and I live with that every single day. She looked at Eleanor, her eyes pleading for some kind of absolution, some small crumb of forgiveness that might lessen her burden. Eleanor took a slow sip of her tea, considering her. She felt no anger, no bitterness. She felt nothing at all. The wound had scarred over, leaving clean, healthy tissue behind. I hope you find what you're looking for, Chloe, she said, her voice gentle but firm. It was not forgiveness, but it was a release. She was releasing her from the narrative, from the role of villain in her story. She was simply irrelevant. Just then, Sarah walked in, smiling when she saw Eleanor. She came over and kissed the top of Eleanor's head. Sorry I'm late. The traffic was a nightmare. Eleanor's face lit up with a genuine, unforced smile. No problem. Sarah, this is Chloe. Chloe, Sarah. Chloe managed a tight, pained nod. The contrast between Eleanor's past and her present was standing right there, a living, breathing diorama of her catastrophic mistake. It was good to see you, Chloe, Eleanor said, her tone indicating the conversation was over. She turned her full attention to Sarah, her back to the ghost at the table. She didn't look back as Chloe turned and walked out of the coffee shop, out of her life, for good. Outside, the Seattle sun had made a rare appearance, breaking through the clouds and glinting off the water. Eleanor took Sarah's hand, the warmth of it real and solid, and they walked out into the light, leaving the shadows behind. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. We'll see you again soon.